Hey, JJ. It was a great weekend for one JJ as Spawn sunk a 64-foot putt to win the U.S. Open and more than $4 million. Did you have any amazing triumphs over the weekend?
No amazing triumphs, but I gotta say this. Us JJs, we're in a fraternity. We root for other JJs. We love other JJs. So JJ Spawn's win, low-key, kind of a win for me too. I'm JJ, and last year I tried my hardest to become a best ball bro. I drafted over 500 teams, I talked to some of the most successful best ball players in existence, and I admittedly had mixed results. So this year, I'm going to chase that title once again. My plan is to max enter DraftKings Millionaire Maker, and I'm going to document all of it while talking to the brightest best ball minds on the planet. Last year, I didn't quite get there, but this year, this is going to be the year where I officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft a $20 best ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's two chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by my co-host Rich Ryan. Rich, same exact color t-shirt as me today. How's it going, buddy?
What was the joke from Mean Girls? We've got ESPN.
Oh yeah.
As soon as the camera popped up and we looked at each other, we about fell out of our chairs because yes, we are twinning today.
I was upset. And I also, people are going to be able to green screen us with these shirts. I mean, it's rough, but it is wild. We're not only wearing green shirts, like the shade of green is pretty on point, and it wasn't planned. We're just, it's like we're a married couple at this point. That's
right. We're, you know how when people are close together for a long time, they just start morphing into one another. Well, we're getting to that stage, you and I, JJ.
Yeah. You do that. Do you do that with your wife where you guys are about to like go out to dinner or something and then you get changed and you're waiting on the couch or something and she comes out and you're like wearing the exact same thing?
It happens way more than you think, especially if you like the same color tones or patterns or anything like that. And then me, it's way easier for me to just switch, right? It's usually just like one shirt or something like that. Whereas, you know, Jenna's done an amazing job getting up and I'm just like, okay, let me just make this 5 minutes and we can get out of here.
Yeah. Yes. Not a ton going on with the intro today and you know, with our show sheet. I feel like we've kind of talked about what's going on in the DraftKings best ball world and in my drafts, and nothing's really changed over the last week, but you came prepared with a few guys that have shifted in ADP. So we can go through that a little bit, give a take, talk about it. You know, it's kind of a weird time in the NFL calendar where not a lot of stuff is happening. So there's not going to be a lot of stuff to report, but let's get through some of these players.
Mini camps are over. Teams now have a month to pray that their players don't do anything stupid or get hurt before they return for training camp. And yeah, we're believe it or not already a month into this show. So I looked at some players whose ADP has adjusted, and the ones we're actually going to look at have been the ones that have jumped up a lot this past week. And the two no-brainers are at the running back position with J.K. Dobbins and Nick Chubb signing with the Broncos and Texans, respectively. Dobbins up 44 spots to the mid-12th, and Chubb up 24 spots, a full 2 rounds to the mid-15th. So I'd love to hear your opinion on them, and then how it may be affecting how you approach both RJ Harvey and Joe Mixon.
Yeah, so I still think that Harvey and Mixon are going to fall a little bit further because, you have all of these drafts from an ADP perspective that had them in a certain position based on not having Dobbins, not having Chubb. It's going to take a little bit of time for that ADP to truly fall, in my opinion, to the right spot. And so I do think there's still room for them to fall a little bit. With Dobbins and Chubb, I'm not going after Chubb aggressively at the moment, but I think Dobbins is kind of an interesting get right now. And I've noticed in my drafts, because the way that I set up my rankings for DraftKings, and you guys can get these over on Patreon if you want to, the way I set them up is I have my season-long rankings, and then I build a formula that merges those rankings with DraftKings ADP to give you a set of DraftKings rankings, and it adjusts for like wide receivers being a little bit more important, all that good stuff. But it'll give you a set of rankings that's influenced by ADP. And the thing that has been a little bit frustrating for me that I've realized is that I'm way higher than the market on J.K. Dobbins right now, but he's being pushed down by that ADP a little bit. And so I'm still not getting I want J.K. Dobbins at this price point, and where he's been going, and almost, I could realistically make the case to get him in every draft, because I think that right now in Denver, he's the clear-cut RB2 on that team. He's going to see some early down work. He'll still see some long down and distance stuff. He has contingent upside, and that's a backfield that, as I've noted so many times now, Sean Payton in that backfield, or Sean Payton as a head coach since 2011, he's coached 12 seasons in the NFL, and his teams have never ranked worse than 6th in running back target share, which is wild because it's not like he only had Darren Sproles and then Alvin Kamara. I mean, he had Mark Ingram in there a little bit, who's not known for like being a crazy great pass catcher. Obviously, last year, Javonte Williams sees 70 targets and the backfield was 5th in target share. Year before that, it was 1st in target share. So like, he's had a lot of different players come in and out of his backfields, and they're still consistently top 6. And we're going to see that likely again. So RJ Harvey, I think, is going to settle in a place where I'm going to be drafting him, right? I want a piece of RJ Harvey. Rookie running backs aren't bad bets in those middle rounds. And then on top of that, it's a really great situation, good offensive line, up and coming quarterback, good system, not a lot of secure pass catchers there either to play into the idea that this backfield can see a lot of looks through the air, but J.K. Dobbins will still get some of that. Like, he's still, Dobbins is coming off a season where he had over a 10% target share, and that was in an offense, in a Greg Roman offense that doesn't target running backs at that high of a rate at all historically. And so I think Dobbins can still see some work. I like RJ Harvey more, of course, but I think Dobbins should be ranked as like a high end 4 or low end 3. And he's being ranked he's being drafted well after that right now. So there's contingent upside. There's a lot to like about just his usability week to week. I think he's a good 0 RB target. When it comes to Nick Chubb, I just don't know if there's enough upside. Like, even if I was thinking these scenarios, like, okay, we're drafting handcuffs, right? Like, we're in that range. We're getting backup running backs who we hope can give us some production, and Chubb might be able to give us some if he gets like 5 to 8 carries a game as like a change of pace type player or something like that. So Chubb can give us some. But if Joe Mixon goes down, do we think Nick Chubb is a true bell cow in that offense? Maybe the answer to that is yes. Maybe the answer to that is yes. I'm just thinking out loud here a little bit. I don't know. Like, I think that you can make the argument better for some other dart throw backs, even like a Rico Dowdle or something as like a, like to the point where I'm not saying fade Chubb. I'm saying that we don't need to be quite so aggressive with him, because I don't know if he would have the pass catching upside, which he's never shown throughout his career. I don't know if he'd have the pass catching upside to like be that true bell cow. And so as a result of that, I'm not going to be overweight on Chubb, but I would be gladly overweight on J.K. Dobbins.
There's also the age and the wear and tear on Chubb, which,
right,
to be fair, Dobbins has as well, getting hurt again last year. But we're not far removed from Dobbins ripping off 200-yard games to start the season last year, and you taking arrows because you called him a sell candidate, and everyone thought that was nuts. To be fair, he had a very solid year, 900 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns, including that injury. So this is a guy who's doing it as recent as last year in a very ambiguous backfield. So yeah, Dobbins is a guy I think we should be looking to scoop up. The other running back who jumped up a full round, now granted we're talking about late teens here, but into the late 18th round was Miles Sanders. And I'm assuming this is coming from folks who are looking at that Cowboys running back room and saying, okay, they might grab one of these free agents, and now they haven't. I'm interested in this 1 round jump. I'm interested in your thoughts on Miles Sanders.
Yeah, look, I've been doing live streams over on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. And if you're listening to the audio version of this show, you can also see our matching green shirts over on YouTube as well. So definitely check that out. But I've been doing live streams, best ball drafts over on the YouTube channel over the last week. And I'm going to be doing them all summer. But it was funny because yesterday I did one. And I really did like my team, but I had a Jaden Daniels team. I had stacked him with Terry McLaurin. And I wanted some Cowboys bringbacks. And I did get Jake Ferguson as one, but I was hoping to get Miles Sanders in like the 19th round or something, 18th round. And I got sniped literally right before I picked. Someone sniped me with Miles Sanders. I never thought in 2025 I would be upset about being sniped with Miles Sanders. But look, I mean, he's getting some first team reps. And I think that's why people are at least intrigued and remembering that he's part of this backfield. Because we've kind of just said, okay, it's probably Javonte Williams with Jaden Blue mixed in, which I still think is the likely outcome here. But, in this kind of environment where you do get those 2 extra rounds, especially on DK, where you are able to throw some more darts and kind of play around a little bit. I understand going after Miles Sanders. Crazier things have happened in fantasy football than Miles Sanders giving us like an RB4 season. It's very possible in an offense that is fairly attractive and like you said, is ambiguous. So I've been trying to get a little bit more Sanders just based on the reports. There's situations like this where, he was, let's say 20th round pick a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and people weren't even thinking about drafting him. And now people are. I don't really mind still buying into that because he's still an 18th round pick. It's really not that big of a difference and not that big of a deal. And you're still getting, lower, ownership, if you will, based on what happened, the first like month of Millie Maker season where people weren't drafting him. So there is still an edge on those teams that just didn't draft him at all, or those leagues that didn't draft him at all. If they didn't, I'm still fine with drafting him at this point. Do I think Miles Sanders is going to be a league winner or the league winner this year? Absolutely not. But I do think that he could hypothetically have some spiked weeks.
Last week, you said the tea leaves, while you're reading them, look like Daniel Jones is poised to be the starter, and the market is starting to move in that direction. He's up almost a full round, 11 spots to the mid-16th. I know you talked about him briefly, so touch upon Daniel Jones. And then I'm more interested in Anthony Richardson. Down 8 spots, obviously, it makes sense to correlate with the jump up in Daniel Jones that the market would be cooler on Anthony Richardson. This is a player who is going late 4th round, and for obvious reasons, both situationally and performance-based, he is no longer being seen as that type of player with that type of upside. But what sort of teams or builds, or ever at all, JJ, are you clicking AR-15 in drafts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I haven't really taken them at all since a lot of the news has dropped, just because we do have a, scarce number of spots in our best ball lineups. And maybe this is the wrong approach, but I see it as I would be much more inclined to throw that dart in season long at this point. Like if we were drafting our season long teams right now, I'd be throwing darts at Anthony Richardson because there's still a chance that he starts, sure. But even if he doesn't, we'll at least have a better idea closer to the season and we can just dump him or, figure out what to do there and then replace him in our lineup. We can't replace him in our lineup this time of year. And this time of year, we have a lot more ambiguity about what roles players are going to play. And so as a result of that, it is a lot more, it's a lot easier for me, at least mentally, to take random stabs at guys at running back and wide receiver where, we don't know how these backfields are truly, like Miles Sanders, for instance, we don't know exactly how these backfields are really going to shape up. And like the way I also see it is if Anthony Richardson, if it becomes more of a competition in July, is his ADP really going to rise that much? Because it wasn't really that high to begin with.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't want to bring up injury because no one wants to think about that. But let's say Daniel Jones wins Mega Millions today, right? And he's like, I'm not going to get my head caved in. I'm going to retire from football. Like, what does Anthony Richardson's ADP balloon to? Kind of where Daniel Jones is right now. Like,
yeah, it's not. Yeah, it at least wouldn't go. Like, I don't think it would go substantially high. I'd probably actually be in on Anthony Richardson then, because I do think that the weekly rushing upside is attractive enough to like throw that dart. And we've seen the upside week to week when he has played. He has, you know, the rushing touchdown potential and all that stuff. But yeah, like I just, given what we know and the likely scenarios, like the best case right now for Anthony Richardson looks like he's going to be in a competition with Daniel Jones. The median case looks like Daniel Jones is going to start the year as starter. Like, I think that's the likely outcome at this point, right? And so if the best case scenario is a competition, then I have plenty of time from now in the middle of June until late July and into August to get Anthony Richardson exposure if I'm on top of the news, because I don't think that the ADP is going to jump enough for me to regret not really drafting him that heavily right now.
Love it. I think we're probably the only humans on the planet that spent 3 minutes of content talking about Anthony Richardson. To be fair,
this is a good segue to today's guest. We have Tyler, Emo Cowboy, on Twitter, one of the better Twitter accounts out there. Really fun follow. He's a best ball player and streamer. We talk about what drafters do incorrectly in best ball. We talk about zero RB candidates, his favorite stacks, which is the segue because he talked about Daniel Jones a little bit, which was pretty interesting. Quarterback strategy, a lot more. It was a great conversation with Tyler. So without further ado, here's that interview. All right, Tyler, the question I want to start with here is that when you look at how best ball drafters just typically and generally draft, what's the one thing that you believe they do incorrectly, sort of in sum and altogether?
You know, this was a tough one. I never do good with pick one because I love.
You can pick many. You can pick many.
I think the one that struck me the most when I look back the last few years of playing best ball, I try to do like a lessons learned every offseason. And I'm like, what do I want to fix? What do I want to adjust? And the thing I've been harping on lately is that I don't think we do a good enough job as drafters to like draft like we're right. We say that a lot, but I notice a lot. I see it in chats. I see it in, forums, Discord, everybody talking about it. You get halfway through and too many teams are like, oh, well, what if I got this wrong? I think drafting like you're right is so key because there's going to be so much variance and chaos that happens over the course of a 17-week season in fantasy. We see it week to week all the time, but we get comfy that we're confident in how things are going to work out now. And the overconfidence thing is part of that aspect. But I think it's key that for that team, for that room, drafting like you've selected correctly and following through. When people talk about like telling a lineup story, I think part of the key of that is that it's consistent with how you're building it. And you're trusting that you've hit on the right guys, you've attacked the right archetypes, or that, the injuries or opportunities are going to benefit who you've added to this roster. You're not double counting or getting like, I need a third quarterback because what about an injury? Well, draft like you're right. And if a third quarterback comes up that stacks, cool. We know that's good for the team, but you're not shoving something into a team because you're getting doubts halfway through the room. And I think that's easy for first timers, but also for people that like you just get so much information throughout this offseason. And I think you start to kind of doubt or do anything like that. And that's just something I've noticed that I'm like, I want to trust my construction and my players that I've gotten it right and hope, cards fall where they may. But I've been challenging myself to like, quality over quantity at the positions that I've allocated correctly and just trusting that, like not just throwing something on because it makes me feel better. I'm going to challenge myself that I've gotten things correct thus far because we don't need to be perfect. We need to be close enough and then just get lucky. And I try to remind myself that because I am someone that likes to be very precise, very accurate and nail everything. I'm just not.
Yeah. When you say that you should be drafting as if you're right, I'm assuming, and I think people would have this question too, is that you're focused more on the early rounds of your draft and in the middle of your draft when you're saying something like that. So if you get through round, like, is there a point in time where, you know, you're not in the late rounds necessarily covering your bases with what you did early, but you are drafting in the late rounds to just expand that portfolio and expand the range of outcomes and stuff of how your lineup can be effective based on what goes down in the season. But I'm assuming that what you're saying is more focused on those early rounds. And is there a point in time where you're not thinking about that as much?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I'm taking a lot of receivers early, I'm going to need less of them because I've allocated that. If I took running backs early, I don't need to feel like I'm getting left behind at RB 3, 4, 5 because, well, I've gotten 2 guys I trust that are my anchor points. And I think one thing we don't do well enough is like correlation, like mining that comes in a lot of different forms and formats. And what's still really important is just hitting on league winners. And we know that a lot of league winners come from these late round guys because of injuries, because of, unforeseen circumstances. And so giving ourselves as many shots at mining those and not getting distracted with trying to maybe, backfill something that, we already basically took care of. We filled out our starting lineup early on, ideally, or we established this is where I want to be strongest. And now it's just addressing everything else as it's going. Really. And I think part of that also comes from like building a team backwards. Like as you're getting your early picks, you're starting to see where is this going to go? And every draft room is going to be differently, but yeah, like where is this going to go and how is this going to fit into what I've already done?
Right.
And I think that allows you to be flexible as well with how those rooms play out.
Yeah.
Because getting through those rooms might be tougher than others. You get in some really sharp rooms. And I think that's where you might feel like, oh man, am I getting left behind here? Just trust that you've allocated it correctly thus far. And it's kind of like, I remember my dad, like how I got taught how to drive. It was like, hey, don't focus on right in front of you. That's how you get in a wreck. That's how you're going to like miss something. Keep looking like way ahead, several cars ahead. That's how you're going to get that bend. That's how you're going to get that turn. And I think drafting like that with a next few rounds, full thing. How do I want to see this roster play out as best I can? And I'm going to veer through traffic as needed with how I need to do that and not get hyper focused on like this round or this player. Those are the drafts I feel most secure about. And I think if you're doing a portfolio, I think that's how you're going to build the strongest portfolio you can, which is really the only way you can play this game. Yeah. Like to see results, year over year.
Yeah, I mean, the example that I can go to is, I did a live draft yesterday on YouTube, and, I went pretty wide receiver heavy, but David Kitchen, COO of Late Round Fantasy Football, jumped into the same draft that I was in. I had no idea he was doing that, and he jumped in and he started Bijan and Devon Achane, and then he didn't draft a running back for 8 or 9, 10 rounds, and obviously that goes back to what you're saying in terms of, okay, if you're getting Bijan and Devon Achane, you have to assume that those players are going to perform at their cost, or better than their cost, type of thing, right? Yeah. And so if Devon Achane is 2025 or 2024 Achane and Bijan is the RB1 in fantasy football, then what do you need? I don't know, Tony Pollard for? There's no need to really like force that into your lineup and into your structure. I think that's something that I agree with, that I learned pretty quickly last year in doing this and going through this process. But I think that a lot of folks, especially on DraftKings where things are a little bit more wild, there's a definite need for that. And speaking of what's going on over on DK, do you think that people are overvaluing quarterback right now? I've asked this question to a lot of the guests on Becoming a Best Ball Bro. Gotten different answers from each one, I think, but I think it's a really interesting conversation because there's in one breath there's what the market is doing, and then in the other breath there is what's actually optimal, and we have to kind of mix those things together to figure out what's best for us. So how are you kind of approaching it?
Yeah. And the more I thought about this question, the more I was left with yes and no. DK has bonuses. It really rewards the guys that explode. And so for the elite guys, I do feel like compared to the last few years of drafts, the elite guys aren't quite priced the way we've normally seen them. Usually 1 or 2 guys is priced extremely aggressively, slowly falls by the end of the summer. And then maybe they kind of, settle in around the 2-3 turn, min 3. Right now, those guys haven't been priced like super aggressively early just yet. And so I think for those guys, we know that these dual threat guys that also possess super high passing ceilings are going to give us these huge outlier games on the ground and the air. And we know that DK scoring is very good for that. So I think for the early guys, I feel it's justified simply because it also feels like a very flat tier for the positional guys outside of quarterback. So it's like, I see the justification, especially with quarterback scoring on these platforms is so powerful because it is a onesie position. And for the guys that can truly separate, it's huge. There's the opportunity cost aspect of that because there could be some guys that you're not taking when you take those early elite quarterbacks that could provide you way better leverage at the running back or wide receiver position. There's a couple of guys I'm interested in. So when those guys are off, I'm comfortable saying, hey, I know DK gets really weird with their quarterbacks. Like they go. And so I will say for the mid tier, it is a little aggressive. And I think they are a little over their skis with trying to essentially catch up to the early guys going by pulling up these mid round guys. We see that happen in the real NFL, like contract wise, like
true. Yeah.
Not all of these guys are deserving, but the market's the market. And so the way I try to play that is I'm okay buying into the elite guys with these elite bonus ceilings. Hurts in this year presents a really nice opportunity to buy, arbitrage the cost by like a round and a half, sometimes 2 full rounds. And I'm very happy doing that. And then outside of that, trying to really push myself to say, I as a drafter, I love arbitraging. If I can get a similar type of profile much later, I'm trying to, say that like, not only will your guy not hit expectation, but even if he does, but my guy way outperforms it, meets that. And then the guy I took, so it's like trying to match those, 2v2s, those 1v1s, arbitraging. And so I do think what the funny thing is DK has pulled up this like very fine, but a little overpriced middle tier. And then the next tier of guys, I'm really into because I'm like, these prices are pretty stable across all the other best ball platforms because we're just as market, we're not as sure. It's not the most fun bets. There's less certainty. Yeah. And I think that presents a really fun way to say, okay, if I do pass on these early guys, and I think are quite fine bets in and of themselves, the first 3-4 guys, I'm going to push it and wait to try to like just stack up the Trevor Lawrences, the JJ McCarthy's, who's already now gotten more expensive than Trevor Lawrence, but like buying in these guys that it's like, I'm not just buying into a name. I'm buying into, systemically, there's a ceiling that wasn't previously there potentially for like outperforming touchdowns and pass yards. And so the way I'm kind of treating it is like, hey, you're going to be a little chaotic here with the mid tier guys. I'm going to attack this like third and fourth tier because I'm comfortable not having the shiniest name on my roster, and I'm going to attack it with volume. I'm probably going to have 3 of these guys because I only need 1 a week, but for the playoff tournaments, I try to capture as many spikes as possible. And 3 quarterbacks allows me to do that a little bit better than just the 2, which I do think is prudent and optimal if you do take one of those early guys. But I think the worst thing we could do is be buying into probably the worst price bets for like the middle rounds at quarterback, because it's just, you're losing to the early quarterback drafter and you're losing to the later quarterback drafter unless like your guy way outperforms again, which would be historically pretty, outlier.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's the thing. Cause this ties into a lot of the stuff that I've done with season long, where I think that the market oftentimes doesn't cluster quarterbacks the way they should cluster them in ADP. And like it's far more linear, I should say, than it should be, right? Where one quarterback is X spots better than the next quarterback, who's X spots better than the next quarterback, and so on and so forth. And when instead, what we should be looking at is there's a big 4 at quarterback, right? If you like, I think Jalen Hurts should still be included in that group. And then you get to sort of this middle cluster, but that from the big 4 to that next cluster, it's pretty small in terms of the actual equity that you're giving up and the draft capital you're giving up, the opportunity cost, as you noted, to getting to that next group, which is why to me, I found myself like when Josh Allen has fallen to the 4th round in some of my Millie Maker drafts recently. And like yesterday on the live stream, I got Jaden Daniels, or Jalen Hurts goes in the mid 5th oftentimes. And then obviously, Burrow, who, is more of that pocket passer, is a little bit more volatile than some of those guys, is still going in that range. And then, you get the Goff types and stuff that I've made it known that I am not into Jared Goff from a season long perspective this year. I think it's a lot different, obviously, in best ball because you're pairing quarterbacks with their pass catchers, and naturally, that's just like I'm going to draft Jared Goff at times. But I think that there's like this really weird, I think people don't realize that the chance that a Geno Smith or the chance that a Bryce Young outscores a high-end QB2 from an ADP perspective that's more of a pocket passer type, it's actually not that like it's not the odds aren't that bad for the Geno Smith and Bryce Young types, right? CJ Stroud, like those players who, because of how we looked at them last year and because of how they performed last year, we bumped them down in the market. But realistically, that pocket passer like tier and grouping should be massive and not as narrowed as the market seems to, or as clustered as the market, seems to push it. I do want to ask though about mobile quarterbacks versus non-mobile quarterbacks in best ball, because something that I've sort of toyed with and, I've researched a little bit is the fact that like the reason we love mobile quarterbacks in season long is because we're getting that really nice predictable floor from them. And then if they give us a good passing season in some way, and we get these unicorns now, we have Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, hopefully, and then Jalen Hurts. They can post pretty good passing numbers while also posting good rushing numbers. But the rushing numbers are really getting, Justin Fields into the conversation every week, regardless of how good or bad his passing numbers are. That's like the Terrell Pryor of old, way back in the day, and Tim Tebow and these guys who were giving you some sort of ground game work, but maybe not a ton through the air. But in best ball, since you're not having to predict that output, do you think that pocket passers might actually be a little, I don't want to say undervalued necessarily by the market, but are they at least more viable and maybe we shouldn't be targeting the mobile quarterbacks as heavily? Or is there still, a lot of good in targeting the mobile quarterbacks, because from a season long perspective, we do know who those mobile quarterbacks are going to be?
Yeah, I think this is a fun question because I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like, it depends, right? Because there are different types of mobile quarterbacks. There are your Burrows, your Strouds, your Daks that they can scamper for 20 or 30 yards, your random touchdown every now and then. And then you've got pocket passers like Stafford that, if you want to take his weekly prop of under 1.5 rushing yards, which I did often last year, it's like, so you've got different tiers of those mobile guys. I'd say that like it's price driven, right? Because I think at a certain point, rushing without a pass ceiling isn't as fruitful for like total projected points. Like you're right. Really just hoping for the volatile output. And how much different is that than hoping for the volatile output of a pocket passer that doesn't often, exceed 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns to do so. So I think at the end of the day, I still find them a super strong target because I think they're one of the easiest bets to outproduce their ADP simply because they just rush for more touchdowns and yards than we thought. And that can happen a variety of ways if they're like a high rushing quarterback. I think one of the ways to do that, and there's been a lot of great, studies that have been done on this, is just like rookie and early career quarterbacks. We just see those guys tend to scramble more often. And then for a lot of them, it really ticks down historically over the rest of their career, anecdotally, as they learn more of the offense, they become a more accurate passer with better footwork, better timing in the system, more confidence in the pass plays, etc. And then even just like protecting themselves, like being able to control the hits and all things like that. So I think one of the reasons I still want to go after these rushing guys is because typically, they don't project as good of passers. And if they're a much better passer than we think, then like this huge, Jaden Daniels, a great example. Like I still thought his price was super friendly just because of the rushing. And collegiately, we saw a very, very shockingly good passer, deep and from an accuracy standpoint. And if the market was deciding this is just a running quarterback, we're gonna if the market's gonna undervalue a rusher's passing ceiling that we have confidence could be much stronger than it is, then I think that's even a better bet. But then in the Fields example, we've got a lot of data that Fields is a pretty bad passer. And the offense then structurally is limited because we're rarely going to see games where he's got a lot of pass attempts. Whereas a competent passer has more access to those like high pass volume games where he also adds with his legs. Yeah. So I think I like digging in the weeds on these, every player and every instance in themselves. And so I do think blanket statement rusher, I think we tend to overstate what that really means. And I think also like not every coaching staff is buying into that. I think a really good example of that was like Herbert last year. The market was too down on, and myself included, on like what the pass rate could truly be in this offense with these pieces. But then Greg Roman, a coach that had no problem utilizing his quarterback's legs historically, and a quarterback we'd seen have in his rookie season a pretty nice rushing floor, and then collegiately being a strong rusher. And then, all those pieces coming together were like he had some of his highest ceiling games because he was able to unlock that next ceiling with this rushing work. And so I do think these are absolutely going to be targets. And I think it's a better thing to be like, if I don't have a strong lean on these guys, I think to maybe split hairs and do a tier. Because ultimately basketball is about ceiling, right? Yeah. And just guys that can access ceiling are going to be, or a higher ceiling are going to be much more powerful. And at the end of the day, the rushers are just going to be able to do that because of volatility. And it also makes them easier to not have to stack, right? Like if a guy does have a rushing component to it, he can get there without carrying along a lot of his other guys. And I think in DK specifically, it's going to be hard to correlate. It's going to be hard to stack. And one of the ways you can alleviate yourself of trying to reach out of structure or out of ADP to do so on a regular basis is just saying that like, I don't need to have a bunch of stacked guys with these mobile aspect quarterbacks. And to me, that alleviates the stress of having to kind of nail the puzzle all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, especially over on DraftKings where people won't be afraid to take naked Burrow and, people won't be afraid to just randomly grab and ruin your stack. And so getting that mobile quarterback, like yesterday with that Jaden Daniels team, I actually drafted a Jaden Daniels team today, I should say. And, I paired him with Justin Fields because he fell a little bit, but I happened to have Garrett Wilson, but I didn't feel forced to get other New York Jets players. Like I could get a Josh Reynolds in the last round or something like that. But if the build doesn't fit, I'm not going to force something like that just because I know that Fields can do it on his own. But this is also why, like, I think all of that discussion that you just talked about is why, at least early on, and his ADP has crept up a little bit, but like Drake May was sort of that like obvious guy for me where he has that rushing floor, but the passing ceiling, I think, to the market is a little bit questionable. Like the rushing ceiling isn't as questionable as the passing one. But what if things just go like he's very capable, obviously. And so what if there's an instance, a week, multiple weeks, the whole season where we're just getting that passing projection wrong? That's why the mobile stuff is so important on the predictability front, because we know that they at least have that baseline. And then there's that ability for those spikes, based on the passing volatility. Let's move on to running back. Do you think that we can get away with zero RB a little bit more on DraftKings than on some of the half PPR platforms?
Absolutely, because like the guys that get passes, it counts more, right? Yeah. Like it's hard to tell yourself a story on the half point sites that like, it's like, okay, cool, like 3 targets. Like if he's not getting a red zone roll, it's really hard to, it's just about keeping pace, right? So like with PPR and then with bonuses, it is more viable. Like your Tajay Spears, for instance, become way more attractive at cost because, you're getting full points for those 3 to 4 targets and receptions a game, with whatever he gets on top. Whereas, it's like you really need the contingent upside of getting some goal line work or getting all the work for these guys to truly matter to keep pace with, your running backs going in the first few rounds that are seeing this 80+% workload. In basketball and in zero RB, the whole thesis is like your receivers are just super strong, very studly. You're stronger at quarterback and tight end, and you're just trying to like keep pace RB1, RB2. Well, when you're getting points for any and all work they're getting, and everybody complains about PPR, right? Like, it's a fake scoring. Why are we rewarding this one catch for 0 yards while Jonathan Taylor barrels through 5 men for 10 manly yards? And it's like, well, it's scored the same. And so I would love these screens for no yards if it's going to help me keep pace.
Yeah, you're playing the game
for no. Yeah, it's like I find myself dabbling more with that because I find that on DK, because like there's more like Derrick Henry every year for whatever reason. And the reason is I guess they just know more than I do, goes higher than on the half PPR sites, even though he doesn't catch passes. And then it's like, and I think it's funny that PPR, the market on DK tends to not like these guys as much as they should. Rachaad White, another great example. His price is almost exactly the same on half PPR sites as it is on DK, despite his profile being much stronger
Yeah.
It's like if he gets almost no rushing work, but he's getting 4 to 5 targets a game and, getting his 20 to 30 yards, like he's extremely mispriced, in a really good offense. And
with contingent upside too.
Everybody likes to ignore that. No, JJ, I don't think we're allowed to say that Rachaad White has contingent upside. I think
apparently
Sean Tucker and Sean Tucker alone is what I've been told.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like the other piece to that with these pass catching backs that you mentioned, a Tajay Spears, a Rachaad White, those guys in a regular season long league, because obviously a lot of people listening to this, you guys are going to be coming from season long environments and maybe you're trying to play best ball a little bit. In a regular season long league, they're not as attractive as they are, in my opinion, in this kind of format, because they're going to be game script dependent on a week to week basis, right? Like a guy like Tajay Spears is going to see the field a lot more when Tennessee's trailing big, right? Or a player like Justice Hill, right? Another player who I've thrown plenty of darts at in these drafts, because we know we saw it last year where not only can Justice Hill give us a decent weekly ceiling, but when the Ravens are trailing, they're using Justice Hill. They're not using Derrick Henry, right? And that's the way, that's why Austin Eckler has become my number one. I think he's my number one exposed player right now, just in general, because again, you get a player. Eckler, I think, is even a little bit different and better than the two that I just mentioned, because he might have some standalone predictive value in his offense. But even still, like when they trail, chances are it's not going to be Brian Robinson on the field, And so there's upside in that unpredictability for best ball. Whereas, because a lot of this stuff is going to translate. Okay, how am I ranking these guys in season long? Okay, let's translate this over to best ball. But you have to think about the at least this is how I think of it. And maybe you can agree or disagree, but I think of it as like, okay, well, what am I actually predicting from season long to best ball week to week? And this is one of those instances where I think you can find an edge because you're not having to predict that game script component.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Zero RB in season long is so dependent on, because you're doing start sit, did I get the guy that's filling in this week? Do I have enough shots to get one guy every week that's filling in? Right. Otherwise, I'm praying for.
Yeah, you are not having a great time in that RB.
Yeah, exactly. But in best ball, we don't have to choose when they're going, and so we benefit from the chaos. We benefit if the main guy ahead is just. I think it's especially prudent to kind of look at contextual data to give us stronger takes. For instance, strength of schedule for like pass and rush defensive stuff. If we're looking at like, hey, this team's going to get off to projected a really rough start against some really strong defenses early. Okay, well then maybe that makes the RB2 a more attractive piece to add into my zero RB or hero RB build, right? Because if that's going to be a tough defense, well then and that's another key point I like to do with these drafts is, how can I not only be right, my guy is hitting, but it's coming at the cost of someone else, either in my room or in my playoff pod. And so that's what these RB2s that we've mentioned allow us to do, is like, if the starter's getting game script kind of written out, well then hopefully my guy's benefiting and now I'm lapping him because the score you got there is almost useless. So it's like being able to kind of stack those things is really, really key. And we've talked about targets being more valuable than carries every year when we analyze. And it's like, so yeah, the zero RB targets on DK are just much more attractive. I think the only way you do it poorly is types of archetypes. We don't only want to pass catchers are not the only valuable guys to have. Guys that can just take the full role. For years, James White was a nice little PPR hack, but you'd still rather have the years where you're getting the guy that's like James Blunt just being shoved into the line for touch. Jamal Williams is an awesome zero RB target his year, not because he caught passes, just like, hey, if he's going to be utilized in the goal line. So it's like, I think the way to really weaponize zero RB is to mix and match the types of archetypes. Follow, are they like, is this just like a pass special? Dare Ogunbowale in Houston. Great example. Yeah. He is always used for whatever reason as like this little scat back and 2-minute drill stuff. He's not as valuable as a Rachaad White or a Tajay, who have that full game. They have a pass catching role. So it's like, can it help? Sure. But how much does it help? And then, what's the true upside? Can this guy go from some standalone value with full contingent or not? And then if not, you probably don't want to be too heavily exposed to that guy in your portfolio versus some of these, the Charbonnets, the Rashad Whites. They could take the full backfield if it breaks right.
Do you have any favorites that you've been going to? I know you just named a bunch of them, but do you have a few that you've been going to with your zero RB builds?
I mean, yeah, I love Charbonnet, and the Walker ankle news hitting lately is just and somehow Charbonnet's also falling, and it's like I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I know early season injury, whatever, but everybody else falls and rises based on that stuff. J.K. Dobbins has gotten a lot more expensive, but he was a really fun guy, and he might still be priced fine because
he's still, to me, I'm the problem with Dobbins that I found is that I have him ranked well ahead of the market, but I always forget about him because I'm merging my rankings with ADP a bit to make sure that, and then I'm like, oh man, like because I don't want to be like too far ahead, right, with my rankings and stuff. But he's still at a reasonable price. I agree. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was asking some of my co-hosts like last week. I'm like, maybe the good exercise now is a riser. How high would you take them? In August, how high would we be comfortable taking them? Yeah. And if we can all come to a consensus on that, when we get to that range of the draft, let's look at who's available and say, if we're going to take him here, because if his ADP ends up there, then you're taking him at ADP.
Right.
And the market seems pretty aggressive on pricing out there. So I don't have a good case to make against that. So guys like that, I mean, I love Hill, especially on DK, because Keaton Mitchell, good health news, all that good stuff. Cool. But as you've mentioned, like Hill has a pass role in this Todd Monken offense. And I think we were all pretty surprised at some of the games he saw as many targets as he did last year. Yeah. And, the last few seasons help predict the next few seasons and which is what we can expect to see out of this.
Yep.
If we're talking like super late, guys like Jerome Ford are still appealing to me for that pass catch role. If the offense is bad and the line is bad, and if, the fantasy savior himself, Joe Flacco, comes in with just a ton of pass volume, and then a guy like Ford could, get that work. Judkin's not the strongest pass catcher profile. Neither is Sampson. Yep. Ford's still on the field. I don't mind buying gross names late in drafts because the market's just pricing them like they've got nothing to add. Yeah. And I've seen them have plenty to add in multiple phases of the game. And so until I see that that's just a bad bet, I have a hard time not going back to the well when it's especially that cheap.
Yeah, Jerome Ford feels like a really good litmus test where, to me, I almost think, and I could be totally wrong with this take because obviously anything can happen and teams can deploy their running backs in different ways and stuff. But my stance on Jerome Ford from a best ball, I'm not going to put him as a dart throw in my draft guide or anything like that. But my stance on Jerome Ford is that Dylan Sampson is the best thing that happened to Jerome Ford's value. Because
I thought so too.
Because I think that people are making the assumption that Sampson would just play that hurry up, 2-minute offense, pass catching role given his size. He's very shifty and agile, but Sampson was not much of a pass catcher in college. I see Sampson as a pure change of pace, rotate with Judkins, maybe, every 3 or 4 drives or what have you. And then Ford would be that pass catcher that they have for this year. And to me, it fits pretty well with as a trio, right? Together, where Ford then is going to get sort of those higher leverage and more important looks through the air.
Yeah, I don't know if people are aware of this, but Dylan Sampson's probably better than Pierre Strong, and as your third running back in a rotation, that seems like a good thing. But yeah, we've seen Stefanski kind of I have roles for guys, and my unpopular opinion is simplistically, if Ford and Hunt were used to split roles with the great Nick Chubb during his prime peak physical. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure they go absolutely away from that, that philosophy, but also the same players there. And I know Ford gets a lot of crap, but the dude has been really banged up, hamstring and ankle every year he's played. And even still, he's popped in the fantasy playoffs with 20 plus point games. And we've seen explosive plays, 60-yard touchdown in the playoffs last year. So, yeah, I have a hard time going away from guys that it's just I think we're considering them dust, and I don't agree with that sentiment because even if they're not fun, if the coaching staff trusts them and the game breaks the right way, again, I don't have to get too much right. And so it's especially at cost. And along those same lines, Chuba feels maybe the most dead zone type of classic back in this year. So I'm having a hard time not having a ton of Rico. They brought him in, they paid him all right, and they talk about we want to run the piss out of the ball. Dave Canales just loves the running game. And they talked about using both guys simultaneously in all facets of the game. Rico was a fine enough pass catcher last year, and he's now cheaper than he was against Zeke last year on the Cowboys. And you could argue that like potentially the line and the run scheme would be better this year in Carolina than it was for Rico in Dallas. And then just contingent upside. If we're just talking pure RB2 handcuff, once again, the market has decided a 4th round rookie running back is a reason to not be on a very capable vet who has demonstrated good efficiency in both facets of the rush and the run. So I like that. And then when it just comes to like disgusting darts, I love nothing more than taking disgusting running back darts late. So like Sanders, Madison, Eli Mitchell, and even like Ty Johnson, like on DK, just like guys that have roles. Yeah, Ty Johnson's probably like more of that type of like, there's a very specific role for him.
Yeah, like Dare Ogunbowale type kind of guy, but in a way better offense.
On a top 3 offense. I mean, I think we were all shocked when Ty Johnson had 2 games of 20-yard passes running a post route in the end zone. You're just like, what?
Yeah. No, he's a good, like a really solid player at what he does.
He's been a very good pass catcher when it was a bad Jets team. And now Ty Johnson's the reason why I'm not loading up on Ray Davis. Cause like Ray Davis didn't blow me away. And now it's like, oh, they're just going to use all 3 guys. And okay, well then, if I need like true 0 RB, I'm like, well, there's worse darts to throw than an RB and a very good offense. Like,
100%. I like that you brought up Chuba too, because he was sort of the poster child for the yards per route run study that I did recently, where I looked at middle round running backs who, if you look at their previous season yards per route run, if it's low, they tend to not repeat or see good target shares the following season. And Chuba had like a 12-ish% target share per game rate last year, 11 to 12%. What did the Panthers go out and do? They draft Trevor Etienne. They sign Rico Dowdle, 2 very capable pass catching backs. So yeah, he's someone that I've had a hard time with as well. And it's not a popular opinion either. Like people really like Chuba. And so it's a difficult one to kind of go out and hang your hat on. But I'm with you that I'd rather get like a Dowdle at cost than Chuba at cost. Were there any other like early-ish round running backs you seem to be fading, or is Chuba just like the main guy for you?
No, like I'm having a hard time with Chase Brown. I spent some time talking to Joe Goodberry, who, awesome follow for all Bengal stuff. And I'm like, how is this Chase Brown stuff working? Because like all the coach speak is like, oh, we love him. What a great guy. We don't know that we're going to use him in the pass down, and what a great guy. And, first and second down. And then, we'll get guys that fit in. And I'm like, so is he your workhorse? He's not. And then also it's odd that he is a fine pass catcher, but you're looking at him as like a first and second down guy. So it's not my favorite where it's like, I don't, P. Ryan and company, it's not the strongest competition, but it's a team that is not minded like splitting the workload with guys that aren't, all that talented. We saw P. Ryan be a thorn in Mixon, a few years back when P. Ryan had his huge season. So it's like, I don't love that I might have a game script dependent RB in the 3rd round that the coaching staff seems like just really, really like they're like, we don't like how the second half of the season, like, if it happens, fine. But like, we'd rather it not. I'm like, okay, well, then I don't know if I want to invest a 3rd round pick in that.
I feel similarly to the way that, just going back to Chuba Hubbard, I feel like it's not unlike the Chuba Hubbard situation where like we're sitting here and we're talking about the added bodies to the Carolina backfield. And if you look at what they had last year, of course they're going to feed Chuba Hubbard. And it has nothing to do with, like, I think Chuba's fine. Like, he's a good running back. Like, that, I'm not trying to take anything away from there. But a lot of these coaching staffs, you have to look at what they were actually working with in that previous season and then what they're working with now and see how some of these pieces might fit together in some way. And so I understand the logic behind the Chase Brown thing. I think that he's a really, really volatile piece, at least at the very least. You could see,
I don't want to have none because of the offense, but it's hard to say that like this is a great stand.
You could see the upside, but then there's also the scary, like, okay, is he really going to maintain what he did, towards the end of last year with that kind of work share and backfield share? That's tough. Who are your favorite stacks on DraftKings? This is a question that, I'm trying to get a little bit more player takey with these shows, because people want to obviously know who to draft and not just this philosophical stuff all the time. But
right.
Who are some of your favorite stacks on DK?
I like to just try to target these underrated offenses when I can. So like Jacksonville, outside of Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter is falling. There's a ton of FUD for him. And again, I'm happy to just say, like, I don't know how right I have to be about the 2nd overall pick on a guy that's sounds like he's working 80+% on offense early in a Liam Cohen offense. And same thing for like Trevor Lawrence is like, is he my favorite player of all time? No, is it looking like the best draft pick, at quarterback way back when? Like, outside of real football, we've seen Cohen really transform these guys, and I want in on if that, materializes because it's being priced like it's not.
Yeah.
And that comes with like, I didn't love Diami Brown in these stacks early on, but it does sound like now they're not just treating him as like a vertical weapon. They're trying to get him involved in like the short crosser stuff, which to me, I'm like, okay, that makes him less volatile to like fill out a Lawrence stack. Strange, I have no problem back stacking Trevor Lawrence because the RBs are cheap, the tight end and the wide receiver 3 are cheap. And if this is a very good offense, we're looking at all those guys beating price. And then just if those are the guys that spike in the touchdowns in the playoff weeks, you're also leveraging off of the BTJ and Travis Hunter early drafters. And Lawrence has this like, semi rushing floor type of stuff. But I think that's also just a good, like if Liam Cohen's giving everybody opportunities to catch short area stuff, that feels like it's good for everybody to be able to boost the completion rate and give more easy button for an offense that hasn't had a lot of easy buttons. Outside of that, I have a hard time not stacking Tampa Bay just because I like Godwin. I like the back half production that like could happen, especially on PPR sites. Baker's definitely a little overpriced, but we've also just seen that he and this head coaching staff are fine being very aggressive, especially with the pass. And, the scramble rate was way higher last year, but he does have, really good rushing stuff. And Egbuka, I love like first round talent right outside the top 100, who at minimum could be wide receiver 3 in a top 12 pass offense. And at best, contingent value if Godwin or Evans miss any time.
Do you think Egbuka, and I hate to bring this up because people are just going to yell at me after bringing this up again. Do you think that Egbuka's price on just in general right now is a reflection on what happened with Rome Odunze last year? And do you see the connection of like crowded wide receiver room, didn't live up to the hype, et cetera, et cetera? Because what's strange to me is he's cheaper than where Odunze was drafted last year.
Yeah.
But you could argue from a stability perspective, it's better for him because right now we have Godwin as a question mark as to how healthy he's going to be to start the year. But also, even if Godwin's healthy, similar to, we assume that DJ Moore and Keenan Allen would be healthy. And yeah, Godwin and Evans are better than DJ Moore and Keenan Allen when healthy. But you didn't have the question mark at quarterback at all, right? We feel very, very good about Tampa Bay being a top 10 offense this year.
I think it's the market was really excited about Caleb Williams, and they had every right to be. He looked like a very interesting prospect, had some, red flags. I think they were really down on Keenan Allen. I think part of that is, and the market, and also it seems like the market is refusing to move away from Jalen McMillions, who I loved a lot last year, thus calling him McMillions, and not McMillan, offhandedly, but it's like third round pick versus a first round pick, and the profile is vastly different.
I don't get it at all. I do not understand I think I've drafted him in like a couple Tampa Bay stacks just to like, obviously like injuries, but like he is, I don't understand. Where is he going to find the field? Like they're going to run 11. K. Dotton will be on the field. When is Jalen McMillan going to find the field? Unless something's really bad with a Godwin injury, unless one of these guys gets hurt. Yeah. But even still, he'd still be the number 3 or 4 option in the pecking order there. So it's just a difficult thing for me to
drafters have a hard time moving off of touchdowns, and McMillan had a lot of touchdowns, but I think I'm going to zoom out and say that's Baker, that's this offense, and that's why I love Egbuka, because he's being priced as one of the cheapest first round receivers we've seen, and those are just such easy bets because, especially for him, I agree. There's a super stable environment, a lot of volatility gives him a lot of spikes. It's hard not to just be super into that stack. The Colts with Daniel Jones being the passer has been a lot more interesting, especially with Pittman being still so cheap. It's just like target dominant guy. A.D. Mitchell could step up. Sounds like he's had a pretty good, early camp, which is always a good sign. So it's, really, and then Vegas, if the market is like outside of Bowers and Gentry, they're like, the pace alone can make this just super fruitful for fantasy points. And their playoff schedule is super nice. So
love those last 2 call outs. The Colts, I've definitely, with just like the vibes around Anthony Richardson, like we don't want Anthony Richardson to start for fantasy purposes, right? And so the general vibes are not there. the Josh Downs stuff has been like, everyone loves Josh Downs. Like, we get it. Like, he's good. I loved him as a prospect. I get it. Like, he's a very, very good player. Look at his first downs per route run, all that good stuff. Yeah. But the wild thing is that Michael Pittman has just been completely forgotten about. I actually, we did the late round fantasy football show last week, and we talked about bounce back candidates, and I had Pittman as a bounce back candidate only because like the dude sees like a 23 to 25% target share every single year, you know, like getting that on a full PPR platform like this, it's a pretty easy click. And then AD Mitchell, given that he goes in like the final rounds, I'm just clicking him even if I don't have Colts, like just as a player to add if I need a wide receiver who has a little bit of upside just from a profile standpoint. So I like that call out. And then the Vegas call out I like a lot too. Real quick, how are you handling tight ends this year? And then are there any late round tight ends? Because I think that's a place where people probably need some help, including myself. Are there any late round tight ends that you really like?
Yeah, I do love punting tight end because I love mining for gold. And you're going to pull up a lot of crap, but every once in a while you pull up a gem. You know, right. McBride, year 2, Hunter Henry, always undervalued.
Tyler Eifert way back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's these wild, like, a tight end only needs to score touchdowns to matter. Right. And so if you just get the guy that scores a lot of touchdowns, so like late round guys, Juwan is everyone's favorite shout. I've started coming around to JT Sanders just because with the Trimble injury news, it sounds like Sanders is, from the coaching perspective, based on the comments, more live to step into a full-time role. And if the offense isn't awful and he's full-time role, it's stronger than some of these other tight ends, even a few rounds earlier. I would love to be all in on Arroyo in Seattle, but until Fant is cut, and if he's not, it just kind of like LA too. Like, I want an LA tight end, to pair with Herbert, but these might be just rotationary guys. So like, I might stack them just to try to hunt for the touchdown. But it seems like more like, Sanders, Juwan, Chig, and even Higbee could just be full-time tight ends on good to great offenses. That we're just not interested in because there's young guys nearby, or we've just decided, the offense doesn't matter. Higbee, I think I'm ready to go all in as like the he's running all the routes. He's on a good offense. Like, I don't need much more from that. I know that the offense loves, or I know that they love Ferguson, but they loved Corum last year. They can love guys, and the comments,
take time to develop.
They seem to indicate Higbee's our guy until he's not.
Right.
And there's risk that he's not their guy by the end of the season, but I'd say a guy that came back from ACL at his age and then was just put back into the offense full time, and the coaching staff was like, oh, thank God we can finally run 11 personnel with confidence because he's back last year in the playoffs, is a pretty strong signal that like Ferguson's, I think, is there for the development. And if we can get one last ride out of Higbee to just catch some touchdowns, it seems fun.
Are you in or out on sort of the high floor, boring tight ends late? The guys that pop to mind, Hunter Henry is I think Hunter Henry is one of the easiest values, but part of that's because I've just been drafting a lot of Drake May too. So it's just like an easy stack, but let's forget him. Like, 2 that pop to mind are like a Pat Freiermuth, who's kind of above some of the tight ends that you talked about. And then like Dalton Schultz, right? Who those guys will not do it for me, especially Schultz in season long. Yeah. Like I will never draft Dalton Schultz in season long, but are they at least semi-attractive in this kind of environment? Or would you still just say, hey, I'll wait a few rounds and I'll probably get just as much of a ceiling out of some of these dart throws that are more true dart throws?
I'm more willing to push it just because I think the fall off at like running back or receiver or even quarterback in those ranges is way steeper than a tight end. And in Schultz, I have a hard time disagreeing. As a Houston native, this team has tried to relegate and phase him out so many times, and only injuries to the tight end 2 and 3 are keeping them from doing that. So I'm really only taking those guys if it's to stack and just looking for touchdown, like stacking the touchdowns. If not, I have zero interest because I don't think that they present any higher of a floor or ceiling really for my needs. Because if I'm punting tight end, I'm taking 3 or 4, trying not to take 4. But if I'm taking a lot of numbers, I'd rather shoot for much higher upside for touchdown spikes and, pass yard spikes than I am. Like, I'm not looking for safety. I'm not.
Right.
Tight end, I'll take a 0 at tight end. Tight end usually scores 5. So it's like,
right.
I'd rather outscore everybody else everywhere else. And if the tight end's in my lineup, I'd like it to be, as a top 10, top 5 tight end. Yeah. So I have very little, and I don't think any big wins come from chasing safety late, unless you just absolutely need it. Yeah. And I try not to get in those spots.
Yeah. All right. Before I let you go, Give me your favorite values on DK right now. You can give me 8. You can give me 1. I don't care. Just give me some of your favorites.
Well, we mentioned several in like Pittman and Strange and Spears and T-Law and White. So I will just say that like, I think 2 that I've yet to really hear, Tucker Kraft. We just keep hearing more and more good stuff about him from Green Bay. Yeah. He keeps falling, and a guy that just has really great yak and a really good offense that could take a step forward with them all being healthy and just a more efficient unit, especially at tight end, I think presents it like this is the type of breakout we see, like a young guy who's really athletic. And if he just gets more pass work, we're golden. And already looked like he took the full-time role from a snap share perspective. So if the market is afraid of Luke Musgrave, I'm going to have a hard time not being all in on the Kraft mac and cheese man himself. And I will just say, like, first round quarterback, Jackson Dart in New York, tough schedule, really appealing, vertical passing and scrambling ability from the mobile perspective. As guys like Daniel Jones get more expensive, I'm going to go looking for other guys. And I don't really like Tyler Shuck, and I don't like what that quote unquote offers me, because I think Jackson Dart offers me much more. We're talking about the money weeks in best ball,
right,
and true ceiling. So those have been kind of my priority to mix in mid to late.
Yeah, love those picks. Tyler, this was awesome. Really enjoy the conversation. Let everyone know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
So over on YouTube, I'm with Tom and Rich over on the Fantasy Sanctuary, doing best ball, redraft, dynasty, all that good stuff weekly, Monday live shows. We got a lot of awesome stuff going on over there. I do some best ball streams with my buds over on the Typhoon Tower.
Yes.
Terrible name. Don't at me.
It's great.
But if you like Always Sunny, type of chaos and fantasy football, go find us over there. We're having a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm emo__cowboy on Twitter. If you just want some blunt honesty and some memes and jokes, I'm a weird follow. So, come at your own discretion, but, no, we have a good time.
Yeah, man. No, you're a great follow. Everyone should definitely check Tyler out over on Twitter. Like you said, at emo__cowboy. I'm on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Make sure you guys are checking out the Late Round Draft Guide. It will be available, the launch, in just a couple of weeks, which is frightening, but exciting at the same time. So check it out over on lateround.com. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.